Okay, I got my cafecito and I'm ready to share with you how much money I spent on my 10-day honeymoon to Japan. Hello, if you're new here, I'm Danielle. I make videos on my first gen experience. And right now that means sharing vlogs of how I'm applying to jobs, hearing back and getting rejected, but also trying to navigate all this while living newly married with my in-laws. I shared a lot about the wedding and how much we spent on our wedding, kind of the process, some things, some do's and don'ts for wedding planning. So if that stuff interests you, go check it out. But for this one, we're actually gonna talk about the finances of the honeymoon, which is many times built into like the wedding budget and calculations, but we didn't do it that way. We said our wedding budget is our wedding budget, and if we decide to take a honeymoon, that'll be coming out of a different category. Before I jump into my specific numbers, I wanted to share more about this, what is a honeymoon? What isn't a honeymoon? Because it was something that I was asking myself while on my honeymoon. We're like, is this a honeymoon or did we just take a vacation? One that is full and packed of walking and all this stuff. Shouldn't I be relaxing somewhere? Based on Wikipedia, a honeymoon is a holiday or vacation taken by the newlyweds after their wedding to celebrate their marriage. And Wiki's words today, honeymoons are often celebrated in destinations considered exotic or romantic. The choice of words with exotic, interesting, but according to Wiki, it is what we think it would be, right? Like a newlywed couple celebrating their marriage right after their wedding. Well, how is that different from taking a vacation? I'm not the only one that was having these questions because I Googled and I found that somebody on Reddit had actually asked this specific question. And a lot of the comments were saying it's not anything different than a vacation. It's just that you call it something different. We call it the honeymoon because it is the trip that we are taking to celebrate the marriage that we just committed to. And some people were saying, I think what differentiated it for us was the fact that, we did extra special things. And so a lot of people had their own version of what extra special meant. Somebody talked about how they met while they were college students, so they were a little more broke. Other people talked about how they went on a spa during their honeymoon. They did more activities that were couple oriented and just adding extra special things to that trip, which you normally wouldn't do on a vacation or which they normally didn't do on vacation. So making it something a little extra special to make it feel like it's different than other trips that you've taken. How does a honeymoon look when you and your partner, your husband, are unemployed? And that was the situation that we found ourselves in. Both Ari and I, unemployed, having just had a wedding, trying to understand, should we even take a honeymoon? What does that look like? And we went back and forth with that question. Should we even go on a honeymoon? Should we even plan a honeymoon? Are we really in the position to be planning a honeymoon? And we determined that we should go on the honeymoon, but we decided to make it 5 months later because we thought by then we would have jobs, we will have onboarded, and we will have told them when we got the offer that we had a honeymoon planned and this is the vacation time we would need. And that's what we thought would be the situation. And when it came time to it in March, when we realized that we haven't done any planning besides booking our flights and booking accommodations, we needed to start planning, and we still don't have jobs, that it might not happen before we go off to our honeymoon. That played a part into the activities that we scheduled, the things that we did, how much money we wanted to spend. Because at first, Ari was very adamant about not wanting to go on a honeymoon. He didn't feel like, one, he wanted to take time off not applying to jobs, right? To take a break from applying to jobs. He didn't want that. He wanted to keep going. And number two, he didn't want to spend money that he felt like we should be using to live our lives. And so in his head, he was like, a honeymoon is going to cost us $10,000 plus. And I was like, okay, what if we make a plan to spend $5K? That's the max that we're going to spend on this honeymoon. Would you feel better if we did? Would you feel better about booking our honeymoon and taking our honeymoon if we could stay within this budget? And he's like, actually, yeah, I would feel okay about taking this honeymoon if we can stay under the 5K. It was with a budget in mind that like we were going about our honeymoon. It was a once in a lifetime trip, but we were also thinking about it like, how could we make it special without it costing more with all these activities that we could add on to it. And so you'll see in our budget breakdown, like our activities, we did do activities that cost money, but they aren't activities that we necessarily looked for that were couples only. Like they weren't couples designated activities. They were just things that we would have wanted to do anyway. We just didn't pick like the couple newlyweds version of them. Back to why even take this honeymoon. I think the main thing that I kept going back to with Ari was like, we should plan our honeymoon. We should take this honeymoon because one, like, let's celebrate our marriage. Let's celebrate the year that we've had, because even though things are tough right now, we can't find jobs, life isn't about the work and just looking for a job and looking for a job. Like, let's enjoy our youth. Let's enjoy our love that we just celebrated with our friends and family, just us two. And so to me, it was very important to like go back to let's celebrate us. And that's why I was kind of like pushing, and I wouldn't have continued pushing if I didn't think he was receptive to it. But I also was like, we have to keep it within budget. Why Japan? So we knew immediately, like, that's just gonna be our honeymoon destination, because in 2019, we had flights booked to Tokyo, and we ended up canceling that trip because of money. 2019, we were just in a different position. I was training for a marathon, the New York City Marathon, and I was also raising money for that. And the caveat with the raising money piece is if you didn't raise the amount that you needed to in order to participate with the nonprofit, you needed to come up with the difference. So I had that like lingering over my head, like I might have to come up with like $2,000 if I can't raise this money. And I was also working towards paying off my student loans. And I just felt like with paying off my student loans, with potentially having to pay for this donation for the marathon and training for it, I just didn't have the energy or didn't want to think about like the financial aspect of going on a trip to Japan, which I had heard is very expensive. You're going to spend a lot of, like, all of that money stuff. I still hadn't worked through, and we just decided for my own mental health, we're going to cancel this trip because money was a lot of what I was stressing about back then. Fast forward to today, it's funny that money stopped us from going in 2019, and even though we're not working in 2024 and we don't have money coming in, we still decided to take this trip, mainly because of all those things that we did in 2019, right? Like the paying off the debt, the saving, the investing, and feeling like, yes, today I don't have income, but I did some things back then to help put me in a better financial situation today to be able to take this trip. And then the other piece that I think is really important to talk about is, how do you pay for this? So I mentioned, I had done all these things in 2019 to be in a good financial situation to be able to take this honeymoon. But in reality, I think, would we have taken this honeymoon had we not gotten financial wedding gifts? And I don't know if we would have. So I just want to share what a huge privilege it was to have received gifts from our guests that could give us gifts to be able to fund this honeymoon. We made it a big point to put it on our website, to tell our friends, please don't get us anything. Like, your presence truly was a present for us, because we got married 2 hours away from where we live. And so we knew that for people, that's going to be travel, accommodations that they're going to have to spend. And the resort we got married wasn't cheap. And so we wanted to emphasize, like, we're not doing gifts. Like, don't worry about gifts. And we didn't have a wedding registry. We didn't put all those things on our site. And so for us, we felt really grateful when people did give us gifts. We were like, oh, we weren't expecting this. Thank you so much. Okay, let's use this to be able to take that trip, right? And so we did like fund this with a portion of the wedding gifts that we received. Receiving wedding gifts is a privilege that a lot of people don't talk about, or I think people are like, yeah, it's expected that you get wedding gifts, or like, yeah, you know, whatever. I think for us, we felt like, one, very generous for them to give it to us, and two, like, if we did get these gifts, like, let's use it towards this honeymoon, this trip that many people would love to contribute to. And so that's how we paid for it. We paid for it with our wedding gifts, and full transparency there, because I don't want to sit here and say like, oh, you know, this is because I saved 24 months before my honeymoon fund. No, there was no honeymoon fund. Everything at this point was surviving fund. And so honeymoon was taken because of our loved ones and their generous gifts. Okay, so with that said, let's break down the overall honeymoon spending. We'll spend immediately. We are over budget by $100 and $105.63. So we did go over budget, but not anything super dramatic. Now let's go into every category. So the biggest, and I made a chart on the side here so we could see like what the biggest categories are. Biggest category is transportation. So let's talk about that one first. Let's talk about transportation and let's break it down. Transportation was a total of $2,100. Flights were the majority of it, $1,544. And what happened here, because flights were actually more expensive than this, we used our Amex points. So we used all the points that we had on Amex to be able to get $1,500 off. So honestly, this would have been double had we not had Amex points to use. And that was something that did take pre-planning. That was a whole year in the making of like, okay, we want to be able to use some points. I'm not an expert with points. We don't do any of like the super hacky things. So we just did a very simple, like, let's try to use this card for everything so that we can accumulate as many points as possible for this Amex card. That was kind of just our simple strategy. And that did a huge number on reducing the cost of our flights, or else this would have been double. And then all the rest of that was the bullet train. So that's what you see here as like almost the $200 there, but that's for two people. So bear that in mind. And then we have the Suica cards, which was like the metro for really getting around Tokyo. And then we took some Ubers in Tokyo, and we took a lot of Ubers in Kyoto. I think the majority of this like Uber total is Kyoto, because we didn't have that much time in Kyoto, so we wanted to maximize what we saw. And so in order to do that, we were like, public transportation might not be the best for us. Let's take Ubers to get across town. And we just thought things there were more spread out, so it made sense for us to take Ubers. So that was 41% of our entire spending was the transportation piece. The second at, the second at 27% was cash spending. So I wanted to so badly break up every spending that we did with the cash. I started doing that here. You can see it on the spreadsheet. I started doing it. And then it was in yen, and I couldn't keep all the receipts. Sometimes I didn't get receipts. And I just said, this is too complicated. Let's do all the cash first, and then we'll use the card for things we can't use cash for. So the Suica cards, for instance, that was something that we were always gonna put on our cards because we just reloaded it on our phones. So I wish I could break down the cash spending, but I cannot. I will tell you, most of that cash spending is food. Most of it is food. Most of it is food, coffee, bars, and restaurants. Bars or coffee shops, I should say. We don't drink. So coffee shops and restaurants really was most of that cash. We also did all of our like souvenirs in cash. We spent that money in cash. I estimated probably spent $150 on souvenirs. We also, there were like garden fees here and there, but I feel like that was less than 1% because it's like 800 yen, which amounts to like $6 to enter some of these temples. But I mean, most of it was food. So that came up to 1,400. So significantly less than the transportation itself. Like transportation is the only thing that's over 2,000. Then it came for the accommodations. So reading some of those like Reddit posts, or Reddit comments of people saying like, yeah, we chose to stay at really nice accommodations because it's our honeymoon. We wanted to treat ourselves to something special. I laugh because we did not. Our accommodations, I was like, we gotta be cheap. And so our first night, we just stayed in Tokyo for the first night just so that we had like one day of like not traveling. And then the next day we went to Osaka. But our first Tokyo hotel, I think was my favorite in that it was more spacious, but they had 2 separate beds. So these newlyweds are going to be sleeping on 2 separate beds in this hotel room. And I walked in and I laughed. I'm like, oh my God, I'm pretty sure I booked a double bed, but I thought it was a queen size, not actual double 2 beds. And we're laughing, ha ha ha, we're on our honeymoon and this is the first night and we're sleeping in 2 different beds. We ended up not sleeping in 2 different beds. I'm pretty sure we cuddled next to each other. I think that's just how we fell asleep. And so we shared a full or a twin, it might have been. But still, that was our first night. When we got to Osaka, we had switched the hotel last minute because we wanted that one night in Tokyo. And so the location of this was actually amazing. I thought it was a great location. I'm glad that we picked it because of the location. I think that makes it for the hotels, right? For me, it's like I'd rather be in a good location than maybe have like the most fancy hotel. But also we're on a budget. So our hotel here, our room was fine. Nothing special, but we started to see, okay, these rooms are tight. They're tight. I think our bathroom situation was interesting. You had to like hop a step to go into the bathroom, but we made do. I think the main one, and we stayed at a modern ryokan, which I thought was great because most of the other ones that I was seeing, the very traditional ones, are very expensive. And so this one, like, it wasn't a traditional ryokan, but it still had some aspects to it. And I really liked it from the pictures. I'm like, okay, it's not like the full experience, but it's a good price. It is pretty, like, let's do it. And that place was actually really nice. I think it was my favorite. The Wi-Fi wasn't great, but that's fine. At our last hotel in Tokyo, where we stayed the most amount of days, that's where we probably shouldn't have tried to be cheap, because we were staying there for the longest amount of time and we had the smallest possible room. Like, you could not have 2 people in the bathroom at once. And that is when you're like, this is comical, right? Like, we're supposed to be enjoying our honeymoon and here we are, like, on top of each other, and we can't stand each other if we need to be in the bathroom at the same time. So that one was a little bit like, funny situation here. We're like on top of each other. We didn't know this when booking, but Appa Hotels apparently is run by a very conservative man who's very problematic, and something that I would never support had I known ahead of time. So yeah, wish I didn't book through them, or wish I didn't book a room with them. You look at the difference between the Kyoto Ryokan and the Tokyo, there's one additional night, and I mean, yes, it's a lot more, but it's not that much more. So I think it was an affordable hotel room. You can tell though, with the first hotel that we had in Tokyo, one night was $215, whereas our 2 nights in Osaka were $336. So that's like double the price there. But yeah, that was accommodations. Accommodations was 25% of our total expenses. And then activities at a 4.6%. So a small percentage of activities. But again, this is because some of our cash spending was kind of also used for activities like going to these gardens and stuff where you had to pay a fee in cash. So that stuff is not included in here, but these are activities that we did that I actually, loved. So we went to Team Lab's Teen Lab Planets in Tokyo, and it was such a good experience. I was hesitant at first because I don't know, I'm like, why are we going to be inside when we're in Tokyo? Like, let's go and explore at night. Like, let's be outside. And Ari was like, oh, but it looks cool. Like, let's check it out, And I'm like, okay, fine. Even though I felt like it was something we could do here. And I'm so glad we did it because it was obviously towards that end of our honeymoon period. And I was just overcome with emotions because I don't know, just like the rooms and the senses that a lot of all that stuff triggered me. And I'm like, I'm just sad and happy. And yeah, so Team Lab Planets, I don't know why, but you made me cry in a good way. I think they were happy tears. Okay, so let's look at the second activity. This is Mikayadori. So this was a kabuki theater we went to. It was marvelous. This was in Kyoto. I thought the performance was phenomenal. It was a few scenes in the Tale of Gijin, and we got like the audios for it so we can understand it, and that was like necessary because without it, I don't know if we would have even understood what was happening. And it was just so nice to like see Kyoto from a cultural lens, to be able to actually attend a show. Tale of Genji. The final activity that we paid for, and the most expensive one of the 3, was a tea ceremony in Tokyo. So I wanted to do one in Kyoto, but they were all sold out. Go figure. This is what happens when you wait until the month before to start booking activities and things. And they had a newlyweds version of the tea ceremony. It was just gonna be me and Ari, and we'd wear white kimono, he'd wear a black one, and we could do the photos. But I was like, I don't want to wear a white kimono. Like, I want something colorful. And so we just did the regular tea ceremony with other folks, and it came to like $50 each. So those were like the 3 pre-booked activities that were probably the most expensive. Okay, and then the smallest, teeniest category is other. And other could also be used as titled data, roaming, whatever. But we needed to get around. We needed to have Wi-Fi all the time, not just when we were at the hotel, not just when there was free Wi-Fi available. And so we decided to re-sign with Google Fi, which we had used on our Euro trip, and just have that be like our phone for the trip. $71. I think looking back, we would not do Google Fi. So I think there are other options besides Google Fi that we're gonna explore for our next long trip. So that's like the specifics of where the money went, how we spent it. As you can see, the biggest portion of that was just getting to Japan itself. But yeah, this was the spreadsheet that we used to kind of track what we were doing. I can kind of give you the breakdown of our itinerary just so you can get a glimpse of how we organize ourselves. So yes, we got to Tokyo at like 2 p.m. That was kind of like a chill day. Then we went to Osaka. We were there for about 3 days or 2 days. Kyoto, Tokyo was the last week. And that is the breakdown of our honeymoon spending. That's where the money went. I honestly just want to, again, preface the amount of privilege that it takes to still be able to travel while unemployed, while situation with our jobs are uncertain. And I think a big part of us being able to take this trip, even though there were those thoughts during this trip, like, oh my God, we still need to get a job, you know, like that stuff didn't end. The talk that happens in my head does not end. I did take one interview on this honeymoon. 6 a.m. I was sitting on the toilet in Tokyo taking a phone call because I was like, I should be interviewing. And so even though that was still in my mind, in my head, I'm like, there were so many moments where I'm like, I feel so grateful to have this opportunity to be able to take 10 days to travel to Japan, a place I've been wanting to go since 2019, and do this with my husband. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you are going to Japan anytime soon, like, have the best time. If you are going on your honeymoon, just remember to enjoy it. Even if there are tourists like on top of each other, you're having a great time. You're there with your loved one. That's what matters. Okay, I will see you all next week.